And we're live. What's up, everybody? Um, so I realized I actually had this scheduled for 11 a.m. So we're an hour early. So it might take a few minutes for some people to hop on, get that viewership going. So we will wait. But we are going to do a call-in show. People love these call-in shows. I could understand why. It's really just an opportunity to hear from a lot of different people, a wide variety of different perspectives. So I'm going to drop that invite link in the chat. Whoever wants to hop on is more than welcome to. We'd love to hear from you. Obviously, we're going to keep it respectful. We allow for, again, a wide variety of different opinions and perspectives, as long as we can engage on these perspectives and opinions in a way that is respectful. Drop the link. I see we have a question from Andrea Gonzalez. Andrea, good to see you here. Andrea goes, any plans to moderate a convo with women? I've noticed that women are rarely involved in moderated conversations about Israel and Palestine. I'd love to see some female representation. Thank you. Yeah, so that's a great question. We'd love to have more women on the show. Interestingly, when we do these call-in shows, this is really an opportunity for anybody to hop on, but it's like almost all men that decide to join. Interestingly, I don't know if this speaks to just the demographic of the viewership of this channel, or if for some reason women are just less inclined to come on a public conversation, whether there's they feel like they face more backlash, they're treated less kindly, are there biological reasons? I just really don't know. I think it's probably a combination of many things, but when we do have just freedom for anybody to hop on, it's primarily men coming on. In addition to that, most influencers and thought leaders in Israel-Palestine are men as well. So when we have somebody on who's known, also that's primarily men. But I do agree that it would be great to have more women on the show. Currently, with their limited capacity, we don't do so much outreach to try to bring in guests on. But I'm working actually to get some funding from different organizations, either a grant or some funding, and then we can hire somebody full time. And then it would really allow us to get just a greater representation of people on the show. So that is something we are working on, but might take some time. And then there's also, the more patrons we get, the more viewers we get. Also, that this channel is monetized. We do have some patrons. Over time, hopefully we can hire somebody full time, regardless of if we get funding or not. And with that, a shout out to all our patrons and all our supporters, especially our visionary members. Hold on, where are they at? We have Renee Gordon. We have Adam Blas Becker. We have Neve Goldstein, David Edwards, and Jules Tahakashi. Thank you so much. If you want to support the show, you could go to the description and see exactly how to do that. So yeah, thanks for the question, Andrea. We will make an effort to get some more women on. If you have any recommendations as to who you'd like to see on the show, always let us know. What else? Sunday, we're going to have Louis Fishman on for a discussion. Louis Fishman, hold on, let me go to his Twitter real quick just so I can make sure I'm getting his bio correctly. But he has a nice account, Louis Fishman, associate professor at Brooklyn College, author of Jews and Palestinians in the Late Ottoman Era. So he really is an expert on what life was like for Jews and Palestinians living in the late Ottoman Empire, right as the Zionist movement began, which is a highly contested, concept, right? You have, like, Zionists generally will say that Jews were dhimmis, we weren't treated as equals, or we were oppressed. Whereas anti-Zionists will often say, no, life was good. We all lived in peace and harmony together. My suspicion is that it's probably something in between. It's probably not as bad as many make it out to be, but it's probably not as great as others make it out to be. And this is true with many things regarding the conflict. Both sides are taking an extreme that is not quite the truth. The truth often lies in the middle, not always, but often. So that's a conversation I'm very excited for. We're going to finally figure out what life was like in late Ottoman Palestine. Cool. I see we have our first guest here. We have Ari in the waiting room. Ari, I'm going to bring you on. Chat, feel free to ask questions. If anyone wants to hop on, you have a link there. Let's do it. All right, what's up, man?
Hey, how you doing?
Good, doing good. First time on, right?
Yes. Every time you have a live stream, I'm usually in the middle of my workday.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
we figured it out finally.
Yeah.
So how's it going? What's on your mind?
So first off, your channel's awesome.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. It's given me hope. I'm a Israeli American. I assume we probably had a similar upbringing based on, me listening to your live streams. I live in the U.S. now, but I lived in Israel for 20 years. So it's been very helpful to watch your streams and see conversations. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I always love hearing that positive feedback because it really does help motivate me to continue this. Because I spend a fair bit of time, at least a few hours a week just on the YouTube channel. And if and there's certainly backlash, right? Not everybody's happy with the content we put out. So if all the feedback was negative, it's quite possible I wouldn't be doing this anymore. But because, I do hear from people that they're inspired by it, it gives them hope or it changed their views on something, it's clear that this is certainly worth the effort, right? That these few hours a week very well may be changing people's perspectives and giving people hope. And that's really the intention. So I definitely appreciate that. Did you grow up also not really knowing much about the Palestinian narrative? Like you grew up with the typical Zionist narrative, and then over time you started to see the other side. Like what was your journey like?
I think somewhat similar to you. I was never educated to hate. I was always educated to love, but I just wasn't familiar with the narrative. It just wasn't a narrative that was, shared with me. So yeah, just like on my own throughout the years, I've discovered it myself.
Yeah, that resonates. I guess I definitely wasn't taught to hate. I wasn't taught to love Palestinians. I was taught that we need to fear them, right? It was more so, we just want to live here in peace. They won't let us live in peace, so we need to defend ourselves by any means necessary, because if not, we'll be killed. That was kind of what I understood of it. But it was never that all Palestinians are bad. We need to hate them. We need to kill them. And I think this is probably how most Israelis are raised. I would say generally, and maybe this has changed quite a bit after October 7th, but there's more indifference / fear towards Palestinians than there is hate. Whenever there's some terror attack or conflict, and that the level of hate increases. But yeah, it's certainly the majority seems to be taught just fear them, and then life goes on. So we're quite indifferent. We're indifferent to what their daily life is. We don't think we could do anything about it. We feel like they're entirely responsible for their conditions. So we're just gonna live life as usual. And just an interesting point on this, like I was talking to a Palestinian friend after October 7th. He said, don't you think it's completely fucked up that they had a festival right outside Gaza? Like, isn't that just not being aware of what's going on? And I can understand his perspective, but I understand why there would be a festival just a few miles away from Gaza. The average Israeli doesn't think we could do anything about it. They're like, okay, they're literally controlled by Hamas. We can't do anything about it. Why shouldn't we live our lives? What does it matter what proximity we do the festival? It's not, we don't see it as disrespect or hate. It's just indifference. We can't do anything about it, so we're going to live life. But my Palestinian friend found this to be very offensive. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I think for me, the two overarching questions I wanted to bring up, and I'm curious to hear your opinion on, because dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians, I think, is extremely important. I think it's probably the most important thing to just normalize both people as human beings. But I always hit a roadblock when I start thinking about the current conflict on the ground now. And the two the two things that I get stuck on. One is a lot of Israelis' response to October 7th is, what were we supposed to do? Like, what did they expect? We had to respond. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on different responses that could have happened. And two, a lot of Palestinians' responses, or people who support the Palestinian cause, their response is, you can't tell us how to resist. This is our way of resisting occupation. And I think the question I have, and I think a lot of Israelis have a legitimate fear of, regardless of whether or not there was an ideal, peaceful situation in the land, I think from a more broader geopolitical perspective, there still is fear that there is a Iranian regime that will continue to try to dominate the Middle East and destroy Israel, regardless of whether or not there's peace between the Palestinians and Israelis. So I know those are two large topics, but I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think it's great questions. And Social Surrealist, I see we have you here, so we'll bring you on in a few moments. And just real quick comment from We Pope W goes, it's 3 a.m., so I might drop soon, but really appreciate what you do. Good to see you on, even at this hour. So where are you, like Thailand, India, something like that? So yeah, to your questions. So in terms of what Israel could have done differently after October 7th, and a whole nother conversation is what they could have done to avoid October 7th to begin with. But let's talk really about what could have been done right after October 7th. So there's some range of solutions that very well may have been the most peaceful that aren't politically viable. So often people will propose a solution, but is there a viability to actually do it? Because would the Israeli population agree to something like that? So let me just give you a clear example. Let's say October 8th, Bibi came out, and this is so not like him, but let's say he said, this is a horrific loss. We messed up. This, we allowed an unsustainable status quo to exist for way too long. It was our security blunder. We have one option, is to just go hard into Gaza, where we very well may kill our own hostages, and not return them. There's no guarantee we defeat Hamas by doing that. We will certainly kill a lot of civilians, and to actually defeat Hamas will require us to lose hundreds of our own soldiers. So that's one option. The other is, let's just take this horrific opportunity and make a peace deal. And maybe it's not even a long-term peace deal, but it's their request from day one was release some amount of, like, a few thousand Palestinian prisoners for all the hostages. We could have done that on October 8th and returned all the hostages the next day. The 30 somewhat hostages that have already been killed wouldn't have been killed. The 250 plus soldiers who have been killed would still be alive, and the 20,000 plus Palestinian civilians wouldn't have been killed, right? So there's very clearly a path. Now, this is like a conceptual path to how we could have released all the hostages and avoided a whole lot of death and destruction within a day. But what actually would have happened if Bibi would have taken that approach? It's possible that they would be extremely unpopular. There would be elections. Like, he might not have the political capacity to actually do that. So, like, while I think that would be certainly an approach that would cause far less harm, I don't even know how he as a leader could have achieved that. So I'm a little bit hesitant to share that as this is what we should have done. And I know people struggle with this approach as well, because they're like, look, they hit us, we need to hit them back. But I like to look, practically speaking, what hitting back does. Israelis and many pro-Israel people are still pretty set on the idea that Hamas is going to be defeated and destroyed. I'm not fully convinced that that's going to be the case. It seems like America's losing their patience with their operation. It seems like the Israeli economy is taking a toll. We're losing more soldiers every day, and it's unclear how close we actually are to defeating them. I know, the way Israel reports is we almost have full control of Gaza, but having full control is not the same as defeating them. They could fight an insurgency for many years, causing us thousands of soldiers' lives and just continuing to impact the economy, where we may in years just be fed up, leave, and they just rise back to power. So I think what we're doing right now is guaranteed death and destruction for both sides, but not guaranteed to really achieve our end goal. And in our attempt to defeat Hamas, we very well may not get the hostages back, and very well may not defeat them. So we're guaranteeing death and destruction without guaranteeing any other positive results. So I do think that even just like swallowing our pride, accepting this as a loss, doing a hostage return without even entering Gaza, without killing a single Palestinian civilian, would have been a much higher form of engaging in this. Whether it's politically viable, I'm not going to say it is or it isn't. I really don't know, but I could see a case to be made that it's not. Let's say, though, we do want to enter Gaza. We do want to defeat Hamas. I think even within, there's a level of excessiveness that we're engaging with that certainly could be reined in. Just some clear examples, like destroying the parliament building. There was no military advantage to that. Human Rights Watch reported that we struck over 500 either like medical or like hospital targets. Now, again, that Hamas very well may be operating from these targets, but if we're going to engage in an operation that we can ensure is going to see tens of thousands of civilians injured, we very well could say, you know what, we're not going to target medical facilities early on. We're going to keep these intact and functional because we know that the population is going to need these. Right? That's just a clear decision. Israel does not need to reduce the capacity of Gaza to treat wounded civilians, which they have reduced quite drastically. Not letting in food and water is primarily collective punishment towards civilians, and children are hurt the most by this because they're the most sensitive to dehydration and hunger. Hamas can hoard food and water and continue to feed themselves while the population suffers. I think there's been a lot of excess with just individual soldiers, whether they're executing Palestinians waving white flags, or just killing civilians in general, and there's very little accountability. We even have seen soldiers upload videos of themselves looting homes, and again, they're not held accountable. So both on like a personal like soldiers breaking command and the command from the top, I think a lot could be done differently to reduce civilian harm while still engaging in the mission of destroying Hamas, right? So that's kind of where I land on this issue. I would have liked to see a situation where we didn't need to go all in on Gaza, and I think there is. I think people generally lack creativity when it comes to that. But if going into Gaza is what we decided to do, I think we could have done it in a way to really reduce harm to a much greater extent. Yeah, does that kind of answer your questions? Was there something else there?
No, that covered it, and I think I want to hear alternative options to make me feel like maybe, like you said, to try to think of creative ways of having less destruction, less death. I want to hear that. And in terms of my second point, I'm just curious what you think about, like, how much do you think this plays into Israelis' fear and need to have, a strong security presence, and like security being at the top of their mind? How much do you think a country like Iran or the Iranian regime and their proxies in the area, how much do you think that plays into the fear of Israelis, even more so than, conflict with the Palestinians, just like on a broader, like geopolitical level,
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, like how we solve the conflict with Iran is a whole nother question. And it's like, do they have an interest for the conflict to like maintain? Yeah, I believe they do. I guess I could kind of see hope when it comes to just, we've seen the beginning of a greater Middle Eastern coalition be formed. We see Israel, UAE, Morocco, and Bahrain. Israel's now friends with them. Things are warming up with Saudi Arabia. This should, and again, I can't give you a clear solution here, but this should give us hope at how fast things can change, and can this coalition really transform the Middle East, and maybe even put pressure on Iran in a way that gets them to come to the table and to change their ways. Like, we generally have this like idea that people are not redeemable, or governments are not redeemable, and who they are now is who they're always going to be. I just have so much trouble buying that, because we know the only constant is change. And even really ideological driven leaders are often care more about their own self-preservation than whatever ideology they might be promoting. Often the ideology they promote is just a way to maintain power or rally populations. But given pressure both from like external pressures and internal pressures, history tells us that people in power will change what they say and what they believe if they need to for their own self-preservation, right? So the whole idea that the only way to have peace or just normalize relations with Iran is war, or to destroy the Ayatollah, maybe, but I'm not convinced that to be the case. I'm really not. I don't think there's anything in Ayatollah genetics that makes them irredeemable and not open to some kind of a resolution. Like, I don't think war in Iran is necessary to change the situation. And it's also possible that if we have a solution with the Palestinians, Iran has a lot less, like a big part of their claim, a lot of their claim against Israel is what we're doing to Palestinians, right? So if Palestinians are like, no, look, we have peace, all good, what else are they going to say? They very well may get them to change their tune, or just seeing that they're becoming increasingly isolated because there's this greater like Middle Eastern coalition of Israel and other Arab states. That's kind of how I see that one.
I hope so. I guess my fear is that their concern for the Palestinians isn't even real.
Yeah, I don't
that they're using that struggle. They're using that struggle in order to, as an excuse for their continued attacks and, goal of Middle East domination.
I would agree with that. I think often the public reason people give for supporting something is not quite that, I mean, even the United States, right? The United States, like waging wars on different countries, it's like to preserve democracy, or WMDs, right? They all also give a reason that seems more humanitarian than it actually is. So yeah, for sure. I think the Palestinians in general historically have been used as a pawn by many Middle Eastern countries for political gain at their own expense, right? Palestinians have suffered tremendously because they've been used as a pawn against Israel. So yeah, it's quite unfortunate. And again, I want to hold on. Let me bring Social Surrealist on. Social Surrealist, I'm bringing you on. I do want to make it clear that like I'm giving general ideas here and more so an approach at how we could look at things. I'll be very clear in saying, I'm not a geopolitical expert and I don't have all the answers. But just where I'm coming from is really just based on understanding human behavior, how incentives work, how people change, looking at history, seeing both people and governments change drastically given the right conditions. So when I give this message of hope and the idea that we can resolve our conflicts without engaging in war, it doesn't require me to need to be able to give every single detail for me to make the case that this is a way forward and we should start looking at these ideas. And, I think there's, as long as we can popularize the idea of peaceful resolution as our primary approach, where we seem to have an innate tendency to go towards more violent resolution, if we really there starts to become this culture around not accepting violence as the first option or even just the quick option, as violence will always be the absolute last option, and that is really the culture we create, then we will tend to find better solutions, because that's where our energy is going to go, our mental power, our like, our geopolitical experts are going to start thinking this way. Politicians are going to be expecting it. The people are going to be expecting it. So I'm really looking at this with more like a high level approach of, I know we could solve things peacefully. Let's start talking about that, and let's find a way to do that. And whoever thinks we can't resolve things peacefully, I would say that the onus is on them to make a clear case, because they're the ones calling for really death and destruction of primarily civilians in order to support their solution. So if you're going to propose something that's going to kill civilians, you need to make a strong case that that's the only way forward, and there's no other way.
Yeah, and I'm by no means a geopolitical expert.
Yeah.
I think my headspace is the same place that your headspace is most of the time. But I have, which is why I asked this question, I have this struggle finding that balance where, like, I'm in this headspace of, hope and, dialogue. And then, in the back of my mind, I'm like, what about the bigger picture? Is there like, are there larger are there larger countries with agendas at play here? But yeah, I agree with everything you said, though. Like, it's the only thing we can control is, striving for a more peaceful solution.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, we could all contribute to creating that world. Ari, you're welcome to stay on if you want. We will give it to Social Surrealist.
Thanks.
Sure. Hi, Adar. It's so awesome to be here on Sulha. I've been watching your channel after it's been recommended to me by a friend who it's Connor. I don't know if he's watching here, but I really, really like the project of Sulha. As an Israeli, I get like a amazing perspective to so many different backgrounds and ideas on how to make progress on the conflict. And I really appreciate the work you've been doing, Adar, with the debates and hosting them and all that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Should I refer to you as a Social Surrealist? Is that what you want to go by?
You can, yeah, or you can use my name, Ellie.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm happy to refer to you as Ellie. Not everybody wants to make their name public. And also, Ari, if your camera's off, that's cool. But if you could give yourself a thumbnail, just so we got a nice little aesthetic going. Yeah, so Ellie, great to have you on. I know we've engaged in the comments. You sometimes comment, so it's good to have you on here for a conversation.
Right. Yeah. If you notice, my comments are like I'm like in like a, I guess, typical Israeli in the sense that, like, I don't bullshit people, so I don't like giving compliments or all of that. I do it very exceptionally. So usually if you see my comment, I usually criticize people. So I'm sorry about that, Adar, if I always criticize your takes.
No. I mean, if my takes never got criticized, I wouldn't have the capacity to learn. So I definitely appreciate anybody critiquing me in good faith. Not only do I appreciate it, I expect it from friends of mine to give me criticism or feedback. I think that's how we grow as a person. So keep it coming.
Perfect. Awesome. Is there a particular question you want to prompt?
No. If maybe if you want to share one of your critiques right now live, and we can engage on that. Happy to do that. And for those who saw, I just changed the background to white. I think it's a more peaceful look, but it kind of looks like toilet paper. So maybe I'll find a different white background. But yeah, no. Feel free to share what's on your mind. You have a critique, you have a question, a thought.
Sure. So I noticed that on a lot of, I guess, leftists or leftists in the West who offer, I guess, their suggestions on Israel-Palestine, so many of them, I think, literally just due to lack of research or lack of understanding in Israel, they don't consider the option of Israeli, like, electoralism or trying to empower groups within Israel, like standing together in influencing the current conflict at hand. So I'm thinking, like, if Meretz or Hadash received which are leftist Israeli political parties that, well, Hadash is still in the Knesset, Meretz is not in the Knesset anymore, but they're projected to be in the Knesset whenever the next elections happens, hopefully soon. If they have the Western movement behind them, they have the money, they have the power, they have the messaging, I think they could be very powerful in Israel, because Israel's population might be really heading towards the right, but I think there is a chance for them, especially due to their history, due to a lot of their values, due to some polling data. I think there is some evidence to suggest that they may go left, or at least the left might be able to pick up a substantial amount of votes if there's just effort, there's just like power in these parties. So I criticize like so many like even very nuanced commentators for not pointing this out or not making any effort to change the Israeli population.
Right. So that's a great point, and one that should give us hope. Do you have like a recent poll? Maybe we could pull it up just to look at it.
Well, I was being very broad. I was like, I think what do you mean, like recent poll, like elections, or?
Yeah, well, let's see. I'll try to find something. So, you make an interesting point that often conflict radicalizes us, but I think it could also create a reverse effect where people are just so fed up with violence and the status quo that they could move to become like pacifists even, right? I think we even see this from like veterans coming out of war. Some veterans are really, get out of their military service and they're more radicalized. Others become pacifists and they want nothing to do with war. They understand how horrible it is. So I can see a situation where some Israelis become more move to the right, others move to the left. In terms of polling, I haven't looked at polling lately, but hold on.
Something interesting to know about polling is that when I was watching the Israeli news, I think it was like the Channel 12, they showed that like different scenarios for like the next hypothetical election, and if do you know Yair Golan?
Yeah.
He ran for the leadership of Meretz 2022, and he's current. I think he's currently fighting in Gaza, and he's like a Sephardic Jew. I think he has like a very amazing populist appeal. So if he becomes head of the party, which I think is likely, and Meretz and Avodah kind of form like a unity ticket, they take 10 seats in the Knesset, which is massive, and that's like a real like leftist movement in Israel that could hypothetically come up, and no one seems to be talking about it.
So yeah, I'm happy you came on because I admittedly have not been staying in the loop on on the polling numbers and just the smaller parties and how they're going. So Yair Golan, he helped save people on October 7th, right? Didn't he take a gun? Yeah, right. So he's seen as a hero even from those who are more to the right. He took an arm and went to save people. So sometimes it really does, a hero like Yair Golan, who has populist appeal, could really reinvigorate the left. The polling does show that it looks like Bibi's gone, right? That's at least what the polling currently shows. Now, but he wants to delay an election as long as possible until maybe his polling numbers will change, right? He wants people to forgive him for the October 7th blunder, and I think in his mind he has not given up yet. Like, I don't think in his mind he's saying, we'll defeat Hamas and then I'll retire. It's let's try to get a decisive victory, and then hopefully I'll be forgiven and I could get, remain in power. I have a feeling that's how he's functioning. But as long as the Israeli population, remains in the understanding that, we're done with Bibi. Just enough is enough. Like let's get rid of him. Even like a lot of people in the Likud no longer support him. So as long as that's the case, and you have like a Gantz government and Meretz Avodah in the coalition, like that's a very interesting government that could very well progress like peaceful interests. Like, is that how you see it potentially playing out?
I really hope so, but the fact is that, first of all, the Avodah and Meretz unity ticket with the head of Yair Golan is, I don't know, something like that's too good to be true. Like something will interrupt that. Moav Micheli will be dumb again. Something will happen, and Israel, unfortunately, is heading very right wing in terms of like polling issues. It's pretty, and culturally, like I see this, like many Israelis are like heading towards like a very like right wing position. Um, so um, I'm hoping I'm hoping that after Bibi is gone, a like I guess center left coalition happens. But what I'm thinking is more likely is that um, Gans is just going to be, in terms of the Palestinian issue, domestic issues is slightly different, but in terms of the, I guess like what was it called, like the Israel-Palestine conflict, like he will be like moving towards the right to pick up voters that were, I guess, disaffected in October 7th.
Yeah, that seems like a fair analysis. The question is, will that just be lip service in order to gain votes? The question is, what will he do in practice? Now, I think we're in agreement. It's not like Gantz is some political visionary, right? I don't have much hope that he's going to somehow solve the conflict or even bring us closer. Well, I think he might have capacity to bring us closer just by returning to the negotiating table. So it is possible that he might try to appeal to right-wing voters through what he says, but then in practice, is he going to be as hawkish as Bibi? Is he going to refuse to negotiate and just, maintain the status quo? Maybe, but I could see him trying to do something about it, even for the sake of his own legacy. Like even put altruism aside. Whatever Israeli leader can solve the Israel-Palestine conflict will go down in history, not only Israel's history, world history, right? So you would hope that would give some motivation to new leadership to at least attempt it. I think Bibi, his legacy is more so about like not solving the conflict, but ensuring that there's no Palestinian state and having Israel be strong, not only in Israel but also internationally. But he's really failed miserably at that.
Right. Yeah. I'm hoping that, like you said, like Gans will, I guess, put like Israel's, will prioritize, I guess, Israel will prioritize peace instead of just, I guess, like maintaining the status quo. However, I don't think, I think that's probably maintaining the status quo is probably better than what the current government is doing because of the like far right lunatics that are just in the cabinet.
Right.
So it's really like, yeah, I'm hoping your analysis on that is correct. But I don't have any. I don't think he'll take the steps necessary. I think he'll just probably not like make it too much worse.
Yeah. It's I guess we can only hope, right? But it's interesting when we had the prior to this government, or like right now we have the war cabinet. Before that, we had Bibi. Before that, we had the very diverse government, the most diverse we've ever had. That had Ram in there, which had Bennett, right? Like it was the most diverse because for the first time in Israel's history, included a Palestinian Islamist party. It had a Jewish nationalist party. It had a centrist party, and that coalition lasted. How long? Do you remember how long that coalition lasted?
A year, I think.
Was it a year? Which is longer than many thought. Yeah, and it broke from some like Passover bullshit, right? There was something weird happened, yeah. But what was interesting there, first of all, good for them making it a year, being so diverse. But Bennett, who is a religious nationalist, he proposed, and many would consider him to the right of Bibi. He proposed something called a process to reduce the conflict. It was different policy positions, how we could really change the status quo, do things differently in the West Bank, and maybe potentially in Gaza as well, to what they called litzamtzem et hasichsuch, right? So to reduce or shrink the conflict. That was kind of cool to see, right? So I kind of hope that, given new leadership, whether Bennett is involved or not, that this idea that even if we don't have a clear understanding of how we solve the conflict, that there's steps we could take to reduce the conflict. And there's a lot we could do that's just not being done. So that would be that would be interesting. And there's a hold on one second. There's this policy. There's this organization that's called Litzimtzim Tasechsuch, reducing the conflict, and they have. Hold on, they have 8 steps that they suggest. It would be cool to read it. I might need to search this in Hebrew.
Sure. Yeah, I actually don't know about the steps they proposed to reduce the conflict. But it'd be surprising to hear if this would be like a good initiative, because I mean it's better than Bibi, but like Bennett isn't like a saint either. He's a
no, for sure.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that came from someone like Bennett,
Yeah.
Definitely not a saint.
Yeah, that's what coalition. That's why I really like parliamentary democracies. I live in America, and I'm looking at Israel as like a electoral system, and I'm like, oh, damn, I wish we had that here. I'm like one of the only Israelis that say that, but but Bennett is kind of forced to, I guess, Bennett's party, since they only had 10, 11 seats, they were forced to, I guess, come up with something in that area, So if you have the points ready, I'm interested in hearing them.
Yeah, I'm looking for it. I'm going to translate this to English. Hopefully it does a good translation. Oh, no, this is literally how to reduce. No, this is literally how to reduce the damage if you're having a stroke. Okay, that is not what we're looking for.
Yeah. Don't worry, with this Israel-Palestine discourse, I mean, that's probably needed. It was
that's true. Look, I'll look for it, and I will present it on an upcoming stream, because I think it's cool. But this just reminded me that somebody reached out to me, and he came up with this interesting plan, which is, let's call it similar. There's some good faith measures, and asked if I'd be down to read it on stream. So maybe I'd be happy to open this up, and feel free to share your thoughts. But he wants this to be a collaborative effort of many activists and politicians and just everyday people. But
sounds great.
Here, let me open this up. This is just an everyday guy who said, "Look, let's do something about it," right? And that's really the mentality we need. Damn, hold on. Request access. We'll get this going one of these days. Too many tabs, we live in
you got to group them. I learned about the Chrome feature, or I think Firefox also has it, where you can just group tabs, and it's a lifesaver for my work.
Yeah. Actually, so you know what I do? I just have different browsers. There's different browsers for different things. But then sometimes you get lost with all the browsers. But
Right.
okay, hold on. This should work now. Cool. We're gonna present, and he did ask to remain anonymous, but which just shows it's really just coming from his heart at this point. Let's see, not that. Present. Share screen. Damn, they're gonna make me. Hold on. I'm using Brave browser, and I think I need to change. Oh no, it worked. Okay, cool. There we go. Let's bring this up. Boom. He calls it civilian common sense peace plan that both sides love. I like that. The problem: most modern day arguments are endless circles. Solutions: discuss each topic from the following question. Would you agree to this if we agreed to this? Examples below. Right, so that's a cool concept, right? Like compromise. So this is internal working dialogue. I will recognize my biases. While perfectly understandable, strong biases from my own side can prevent productive dialogue and pull me away from my true intention to heal injustices and promote peace with the other side. I will constantly ask myself, am I saying this to defend only one side, demonize one side, or am I showing care for both sides in each statement I make? So he's saying this is a good basis for conversation. Both sides recognize their biases.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. Number two, I will listen to heal. I will interact with the other side with intention to listen and heal, as opposed to just argue and try to prove that you're right and they're wrong. And by the way, something people need to understand, like, you could be the best pro-Israel or pro-Palestine debater. You're generally not going to convince somebody who's already convinced on the opposite perspective. You could definitely convince fence sitters, people who are in the middle, but like often there's this idea, like, let's take somebody like who makes a compelling case like Ben Shapiro, or on the other side Norman Finkelstein. They're not convincing each other's audience, right? Most influencers and activists are really just preaching to the choir. They get a lot of impressions because they're getting shared by those who already agree with them, but they're not really changing any minds. And often the way they construct their arguments and the narrative they take is not with intention to change minds as much as it's to get praised by those who already agree with you. So if the intention is not to change others' minds, but to actually solve things, I think we'd all be better off. Number three is, I will call in those around me. I will call in racism and unfair discrimination whenever those around me are speaking or behaving in such a manner. Call in means disarming them with love and genuine curiosity for the experience and injustice underlying their behavior. So I think, this is also, the first line you think calling, I like this guy. Instead of calling out racism, which is generally what we're meant to do, and then cancel people, he says calling it in. So instead of just pushing people who say racist things away, try to understand them, disarm them with love. I think this is a profound point that not many people do.
Absolutely, yeah.
4, I respect historical ties to the land for both people. I recognize that there are two people with historical ties to this land, and respect that both people have a right to self-determination and to live by their own culture and customs. Yeah. Right. So these 4 are great. Honestly, kudos to this guy.
Yeah, that was long-term. I mean, internal work like solutions, like those are very, like I completely 100% agree with that.
Right. So that's kind of like just the approach in which we should take for moving forward in terms of like our state of mind and how we engage. Now, here's actually getting to the solutions, short-term solutions: build up Gaza together. We will lift the blockade if a trusted third party tracks aid and construction materials that go immediately to build houses, water ducts, infrastructure, and greenhouse farms. In exchange, money will be provided to build. Right. So this is both sides agreeing. Israel agrees to uplift the blockade, but Hamas, whoever is in control in Gaza, will need to agree that there will be some oversight.
Mm-hmm.
2, accountability for hate education versus police brutality. I invite a third party to review what is being taught to our children in schools. I invite body cams to be placed on IDF security officers and soldiers to review that behavior is by the book with restraint. Solid, right? Again,
Absolutely.
it's mutual compromise.
Well, I have to ask you because I don't know this, and I think you're one of the people I can get like a reliable anecdotal answer for this. Have you like went to like high school in Israel?
No. I lived in Israel for a year when I was in second grade, and then I lived there from the age of 18 to the age of 32.
Oh, okay. Because I wanted to ask you about like how was the education like system in Israel? Like, what are they teaching about like stuff like the Nakba?
From what I understand, there's not much education about the other side.
Yeah.
Like it's not like they're taught the Nakba and that the injustices that Palestinians face in good faith. From what I understand.
Right. I wanted, because that's the impression I got as well. All right, you can keep reading.
Cool. Just real quick, because I do see that Joseph Ibrahim, who is watching this from Twitter/X, is asking where can we call in. So I just dropped the link in the comment of the video on Twitter. I use StreamYard, which streams to multiple places, but when I drop, I can't comment directly from StreamYard to Twitter, so still not full functionality. Shachar Ziv goes very little education about the Nakba. So yeah. Shachar is asking who wrote this. So the person who wrote this actually wants to remain anonymous, but who knows? This might be the guy that brings us forward. And he reached out to me, said, "Look, this is my idea. What do you think of it?" I said, "Look, this looks awesome." And he requested that I start talking about it on stream and get other activists and influencers to get behind these ideas. So this is really the first time we're doing it. And he wants it to be open to public scrutiny, which I think is great. So feel free to critique it. And it's meant to be a working doc that we can build and improve on, given more eyes on it and minds, contributing to it. So feel free to give feedback, and I think maybe we'll start talking about these ideas more. Next one, rockets versus settlements. Immediate freeze on rockets or attacks on civilians of any kind in exchange for immediate freeze on West Bank settlement expansion. And then he puts a question: outward expansion is okay for existing communities to construct a taller building. So again, this is posed as a question, and I think that's interesting. I think maybe taller, yes. There's been a problem with outward expansion that a lot of like even if you go back to Oslo, Oslo resulted in terror attacks on Israeli civilians and Israel's continuing settlement expansion, right? Neither side really held their side of the deal. And you can make the case that these two things are not comparable, right? Killing civilians and building settlements are not the same, but it did show, let's call it, not a lack of true desire to the peace process. And then many would say that it's not that new settlements were built, it's just that some were expanded. But when you actually look at the expansion, it was like really building new neighborhoods, sometimes miles apart from like existing settlements, and it was just considered an expansion. So expanding outward, I think until there's a permanent solution, I think we should halt. Communities to construct taller buildings, I think, is a different question. But I think this is good. Like, let's immediate stop to rockets and violence and no more settlement building. Number 4, pressure on politicians to negotiate. Peace negotiations must resume, and I will not let my politicians leave the negotiating table until the agreement is done. Can there be televised peace negotiations so the world can see what's really going on? Or documentary team similar to the one with Clinton, Ehud, Arafat? Yeah, that's kind of a good idea. I wonder what the pushback to it being televised in public would be, because I think there's much more accountability.
Actually, this one might not be the best approach, because historically, in the peace agreements in the late 90s and early 2000s, a lot of the initiatives proposed by Rabin were very, very unpopular, right? So if they were, and I think any kind of negotiation at this point, or at least in the next like few decades, and a good faith negotiation would result in political consequences. So, yeah, I'm all for like accountability and all that, but the problem is that if some politicians, Israeli politicians, maybe even Palestinian politicians, feel too much pressure from their base, then we might not get anywhere.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. So maybe the solution is that it's filmed, but not it's only released afterwards. So like more a documentary that can report on it after the fact and not during. So political pressure doesn't sway too. Yeah, because you could see a situation also on the Palestinian side where whatever Palestinian leader would not want to make concessions because it would be widely unpopular in Palestinian society.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's a good point. So, Andrew, I see you here in the waiting room. Happy to bring you on. Just either turn your camera on or give yourself a thumbnail, and we'll get you on. Next. But anyways, they finish it. We need transparency on who's trying to walk away from the negotiations, who's trying to present unrealistic terms. 5 is widespread Zoom calls. Both countries need to interact with people from the other side somehow. And then note, this is missing a short-term solution for current situation, of course, but I believe Israel recently said they are always willing to negotiate if realistic demands are made. So maybe add something like all hostages released in exchange for ceasefire. Hamas can flee to Qatar for negotiations, continue from there, and then other short-term solutions to start going into effect immediately. No more rockets in exchange for some kind of freeze-on settlement. So this note is actually not connected to number 5. This is just saying this doesn't solve our current thing. Widespread Zoom calls is interesting. I always wondered how it would play out, but one of the most powerful forms of activism or just bridge building is really just conversations, right? Like the average Palestinian meets the only Israelis they're meeting are soldiers or settlers, most of whom don't quite treat them with respect. Israelis aren't meeting Palestinians unless we are talking about like Israeli Arabs or Palestinian citizens of Israel, but Israelis don't consider them to be Palestinian. The Palestinians they're meeting are, often they're just hearing about terror attacks and they're seeing them on the news. They don't have any Palestinian friends. So really it leaves our education up to our politicians or school system or our news channels. But a conversation can really, break down these walls of fear and separation. The challenge is we don't always speak the same language, right? Many Palestinians don't speak Hebrew and many Israelis don't speak Arabic. So it's not like it's easy to do, but it would be very cool if there was a program in our schools where you would have like kind of like a pen pal, but maybe not written. It would be, like weekly conversations with the Palestinian on the other side. I think that like if you want to change the younger generation to be one that's oriented towards peace, try to create a world where every Israeli has a Palestinian friend and every Palestinian has an Israeli friend. And you'll see the second you have friends on the other side, you fear them far less. And you're much less likely to support a policy that's going to harm somebody who you consider a friend. Right. So
there's a large problem that nobody talks about of segregation within Israel-Palestine, but it's obvious with like Israelis and Palestinians, but with like Jewish Israelis and Israeli Arabs, they are like the segregation. If you go to Israel, back then there was a lot more mixed communities because they just had before the state of Israel came, they were settling. Jewish people were settling on the coast, and usually they were next to I guess like Arab, like they usually would have Arab neighbors. But now, with all these like suburbs that they're building with a separate school system and stuff and things like that, where like Jewish young Jewish Israelis and young Israeli Arabs are super far apart, and you could kind of see that in like the polling. Young Israeli Jews are very, very right wing.
Right.
Compared to the older Jewish Israelis that had a lot more exposure to Palestinians, and you can even see this. And I think Israeli Arabs probably have the best opinions in Israel-Palestine, but you can really see that, like, the difference, because they're a lot more liberal. The
Right.
Israeli Arabs.
And they generally are taking into consideration both sides because they feel some connection to both, right? So in many ways, Israeli Arabs can be a bridge between both sides because it's easiest for them to recognize the humanity in both Israelis and Palestinians. So, yeah.
Oh, before you continue, I just want to ask, like, the chat and maybe you, even if you know about this. I don't know if this program exists, but my mom said it did. That when she was, I guess, like in the early 80s, maybe mid 80s, Jewish Israelis would go over to, I guess, like the West Bank, to meet like Palestinians, and they would it was just like a cross cultural and they would play with they would play soccer together, things like that.
Yeah, we definitely need to get that back ASAP.
Yeah, I agree.
If anyone that knows more about that, let us know. But yeah, that's like these cultural programs, whether it's through sports, music, whatever it may be, is very much needed. Anything that humanizes the other side and gives us a better understanding of who they are. Shach Aziv goes, my high school years in the 90s, we did learn a little bit about new historians like Morris, Pape, etc. That's interesting.
Awesome.
Yeah. So Andrew, again, I see you here, but please give yourself a thumbnail if you want to come on, or turn your camera on and we'll bring you on. Let's continue. Long-term solutions, right of return versus all holy sites. So there's not much information here, but again, this is the compromise. I imagine this is Palestinians getting the right of return and Jews getting access to all holy sites, including Temple Mount. This is a tricky one because until there's again, it says long-term solutions here, but we would need a long-term solution and years of peace, if not generations, before Jewish Israelis are comfortable with such a drastic change in demographics. But depending on what solution we're talking about, like if it's a two-state solution, Palestinians should get right of return to what the state of Palestine should be. And if we're talking about a federation, then they could get the right of return to certain cantons.
Absolutely.
Right of returning to your same neighborhood or village. I mean, those villages don't exist, and like that. Right of return, as many Palestinians describe it, probably is not the most realistic, and there will need to be some cap on immigration just because there's a limit as to how much a country could absorb. But I could see a situation where, like, Israel says every year we absorb a max of 30,000 Jews, 30,000 Palestinians. Like, that's the cap.
Well, I think Israel, I mean, obviously in like a few decades, it's not feasible right now, but in a few decades, I think Israel and the Arab League need to kind of negotiate on this, because because a lot of the Arab countries, they refuse to give citizenship to Palestinians that live there. And the problem with that is that if you look at the UN, like numbers of refugees, Palestinians are just like by far the highest, because like their children and great grandchildren they don't have citizenship in these Arab countries, and because these Arab countries are kind of just like I guess like motivating Palestinians to just keep fighting for their country.
Right. Yeah, so that's a good point, for this new deal to be negotiated with citizenship and then give them the right to decide, right? Like, so what do they say? The number of refugees is like, I don't remember what the number is, but is it like something in the millions now? Because right, they consider all the descendants of refugees also. So it's some. Hold on, let's ask. How many? Okay, 6 million is the number they're putting out, and after 1948, the number was at around 800,000. So this is their descendants.
Right.
Now it's not like there's going to be 6 million Palestinians trying to move to the land. a lot of them who are living in Western countries very well may prefer life there. There's a lot of Palestinians in North America and South and Central America, very, very well. The majority may want to stay. Also, the ones around Europe very well may want to stay. The ones in Arab countries, as you just said, they're not citizens, so they might have more incentive to leave. But I think, we need to understand it's not like there's going to be an attempt for 6 million new citizens to move. And even if there was, no country can absorb that many people in a short amount of time. But it seems like the way the rate of return should go, in addition to what you suggested, which I think is a good idea that I haven't heard or thought of, but for it to really just be capped, like Israel should see what they could absorb in a year and say, we'll have a cap of 20,000 Jews, 20,000 Palestinians every year. And this is really a way for those who want to return to the land, have the right to do so.
Yep.
Awesome. Let's keep reading this. 67 borders-ish. Someone with knowledge of Camp David and land swaps and percentage and rate of return rates per year and all that mumbo jumbo can fill this in. So as you can see, it's still a working doc. Like he would like somebody to have a go at this. So if anybody watching this wants to add to this draft, let me know and I'll send it over to you. And let's really have this be a working doc. And, it really all starts with changing the collective consciousness, getting more people to have these conversations. You often say, what can we do? There's no solution. There's nothing we could do differently. Well, here's some ideas, right? So if we could start talking about this and really like normalize these conversations, this is clearly a path forward towards a peaceful resolution through starting to change the conversation, changing the culture around the conflict. Mm-hmm. 3, achieve peace and trust with no violence for 3 years. Federation or 2 states. Federation would allow each community to have some or total control over their own community with an elected mayor. Another idea, if Israel is 20% Muslim, then allow the West Bank and Gaza to be 20% Jewish. Reason, this may satisfy the claims for Jews who want to connect with ancient homeland of Judea, but they will have to live under Arab rule to some degree. Maybe there can be separate joint court, police system for certain areas where Arabs and Jews both have seats. Israel. Okay, so this is again, this still needs to be hashed out a little bit more. And then no, please make edits, make this better because I'm a noob. So whoever wrote this, if you're watching this, first of all, great job. Clearly the areas that need more detail is really the actual details of like maps and political solutions. But where you really did an A+ is just this internal work and dialogue, I think was killer. And these short-term solutions also are really, well thought through. Long-term solutions, I think, is probably where the most effort now needs to go. But whoever wants to have a go at this doc and contribute, let me know, and we'll keep working on it.
It's always hard to come up with long-term solutions for conflict like this. So I completely agree with you. Those the internal, the short-term solutions, those were fantastic.
Cool. So Andrew, we're going to bring you on. Andrew, what's up? How's it going?
Hey Adar, how are you doing?
Doing well. Good to have you here.
Good to finally speak to you. I've been following your work for quite a bit now. I saw you first on that debate with Noam Chomsky, and I forgot who the other person. I forgot the other person's name, but
Rudy.
You've always been someone who. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it was Noam Chomsky and Rudy Roshman. That was, I believe, 3 years ago now. So you've been watching for a while. So good to have you finally join for a stream.
Yeah, I know. Something about you is that you've always sort of stuck on this issue. Like a lot of other political or like people who talk about geopolitics or like the world would talk about other issues. And this issue sort of went into like sort of the back attic, but you've always sort of talked about it. And now this issue is in like the spotlight. So, a lot of other people are sort of talking about, like, we've seen a guy like Destiny who knew nothing about this issue before October 7th now talk about it a lot. Yeah, and then we also have like Norman Finkelstein who's back in the play, and Ben Shapiro who's talking about. So, the debate is very lively, I would say, right now.
Yeah, sure. And just real quick on the topic of Destiny, it's interesting you brought him up because he recently tweeted that every day he's down to have somebody on his stream who's pro-Palestine to prepare him for his debate with Finkelstein, which is happening either today or tomorrow. I think it's going to be on the Lex Friedman podcast, which is going to be interesting. I think it's a 2v2 debate. I don't remember who exactly debating, but Destiny and Finkelstein are on opposing sides. And he said he'll have anybody on. And so I tweeted at him. I'm like, bro, I'd love to come on, talk to you. Inboxed him, nothing, no response. So Destiny's actually been in my mind this week for calling on conversations and then ignoring me. I don't think it's intentional or personal, but it's I'd definitely be down to talk to him, and he has ignored every message I've ever sent him. So
I think okay, two things. I think you have to go on his Discord, because I don't like. Where'd you send a message to him?
I sent him on Twitter. That's where he said to send it. He's like either comment.
Okay.
Yeah, but I am in his Discord. I feel like it's all like.
Also, I think you would agree with him with a lot.
Yeah, I describe myself as in between him and Finkelstein on the conflict. I'm definitely somewhere in between. I think there's some areas where he has blind spots. And that's what I want to talk to him about. But in general, he wanted these conversations to help him prepare for Finkelstein, which I was very happy to do. And not to mention, I would do it for exposure for Sulha as well. But I didn't get there.
Well, something I think Destiny, he's been doing, I guess, like the bare minimum, like the bare minimum of research necessary to commentate on the conflict, which is a lot of research, and to be like kind of like a voice on the conflict, because I see so many, like as like an American leftist, I see so many like not people that just don't research anything about Israel-Palestine and just give off their own opinions based off complete like vibes or whatever, like a very like cursory view of the history, or like the moral like conundrums that we have. Like it's like, so something I really appreciate about Destiny is that in every live stream he's just doing like he's just bulldozing like through research.
Sure.
Same with I don't know if you heard this YouTuber, but Lonerbox. He's
Oh yeah.
like they've been, both Destiny and Lonerbox have been like very very well researched relatively.
Yeah, but I'll just disagree. I'll just say something. One thing about Destiny is that. So firstly, I watched one stream he had before October 7th about Israel-Palestine, and I'll tell you, he knew nothing about the conflict. And that kind of annoyed me, like that he knew absolutely nothing about it. Like he couldn't even he's a guy who's been in politics for so many years, and he couldn't even like tell the basics of it. But other than that, I'll just say that I do appreciate that Destiny is out here researching and he's going through everything. A lot of people do say, oh, I did say when I hopped on here that he's only been researching since October 7th, but I don't really mind that. Like, he does do his research. He does read a lot, I guess, which is better than a lot of other streamers. But I have noticed that in his political commentary about the Middle East, he has, I don't know how to describe it, but he doesn't have this very natural knowledge about the history and like the history of the Middle East, about sort of the leaders. I don't know if I'm making my point clear there, but that's just the one thing that annoys him. Like if you just strave away from just the Israel-Palestine conflict and just like go a bit more to like the left, like just talk about like maybe the Syrian conflict or what's happening in Iran, he knows very little, and that kind of annoys me that he doesn't know like the overall. But it's just one of my complaints about Destiny. But I don't know what you guys think. What do you guys think about that?
Well, something I wish that there can be a Destiny, or there could be like a Lonerbox of that are of like Israeli or Palestinian heritage. Like I think, because I think that kind of like very rigorous research compared with the lived experience can be very very valuable for the conflict. And there was one YouTuber who did that. Her name is Aristocracy, and she was basically the Destiny or the Lonerbox before they were cool, pretty much before October 7th. She she would like she had like such a, I think she was a university student, but she had like a insane plethora of knowledge on Israel Palestine, and she gave like an amazing text. And that, I think that was kind of um like one of my inspirations for getting to know the issue a lot better. But she quit YouTube. Sorry, she quit YouTube after like she received a lot of like Jew hatred against her. And I wish she was here. She was gone when the world needed her most. So Aristocracy starts with an E.
So I guess like on the topic of destiny, I don't want to stick on this for too long. And I see we have Justin here, so I'm going to bring you on as well. But um, it's great how much research he's done to the point where he's probably one of the more well-researched people on the conflict at this point. But he's not approaching it, let me do as much research as possible and then reach a conclusion. He already has a conclusion, and a lot of the research he's doing, and I'm not saying he is not a free thinker and doesn't have the capacity to change his mind. Whoever, his views have changed a lot throughout the years. But generally, for your views to change, it's not something that happens overnight. Like you get new information, and sometimes it could take weeks, months, and even years until you form a whole new perspective on it. And right now, he's preparing for Finkelstein, and so he's doing research just to help him with his debate, not for him to potentially change view on the topic. So
exactly, yeah,
that would be one critique. But it's possible, like, in a few years down the line, his view on Israel-Palestine is going to be much more moderated and balanced because he's done the research, had time to reflect on it. It kind of got out of the spotlight, and given time, he might change. But it's going to be an interesting debate. I want to see how that would go, because Finkelstein is, he's definitely not as sharp as he used to be. He's quite old now, and just a story. We've had Finkelstein on the show before. He didn't want to come on after October 7th. I think he was just too busy. But I had to call him like 4 times just to remind him about the stream, because his memory he would say, he's like, listen, my memory's not good anymore. Please remind me tomorrow. Please remind me tomorrow. So, he even acknowledges that he's not quite as sharp as he used to be. But a peak Finkelstein is definitely a formidable opponent, especially on Israel-Palestine. And he's quite savage in how he approaches certain things. It's interesting how he's going to do in his current state. But he's definitely the more well-researched of the two. But again, he's probably not going to be as quick currently as Destiny is, who's in his prime. And I don't know the other 2 people who are going to be there, but we could, yeah.
So it's Benny Morris. Benny Morris and yeah.
So that for me, that would be an even more interesting discussion. Actually, just 1v1 Finkelstein versus Benny Morris, I think, would be a better conversation.
Yeah, I was
I agree.
saying that on Twitter.
I was gonna say I agree. Hey Adar, how are you, bro?
Hey, good to see you here.
The interesting thing about Destiny, I actually watched the debate. I don't really pay attention to people like him, to be honest with you, because I know the problem with him is that he is informed about very recent stuff, but like he was in a debate with Cenk Uygur a few weeks ago, I believe, and I thought he did very poor, because he's taking the approach that the Gaza situation started in 2005. Hamas, or 2006, Hamas took over, and that's when the problem started, and they started firing rockets and blah, blah, blah. And that there was no seizure, and Gaza was heaven before that happened. And I think that that's a very unrealistic way to look at Gaza, because there was restrictions on Gaza, and although there wasn't a total siege of what we see today that started after 2006, there was definitely a semi-siege. And I don't think he looks at that. And, I've actually been to Gaza before 2005. I actually had the honor to visit and saw, and I can tell you the border, the crossings and things like that were just like super ridiculous. And this is someone who's lived in East Jerusalem and the West Bank and lived there. I want to say that it was like 100 times worse than anything I'd ever seen in the West Bank, going through Jordan or back and forth or things like that, or going from the West Bank inside Israel. So the whole notion that Gaza everything was cool and this, and Hamas came over, and that's when the siege started. It was a response to the missile attacks and Hamas's attacks. I can't subscribe to that. To me, it's like Hillary Clinton when she said they could have built a Singapore. How can you build a Singapore when you don't have a port or an airport? That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Well, Justin, thank you for coming on. I actually really.
I'm gonna bring Greg on as well, but I also want to give you all.
Welcome, Greg.
In 10 minutes, we're gonna wrap it up. So
sure.
Maybe we'll even start. We'll start winding down. Let this be everyone's final thoughts.
Yeah.
Greg, your opening thoughts will also be your final thoughts.
And I was going to say the document that you shared, by the way, there's some things that you can add to it. Definitely, I can think of a few things.
I'll send it to you right now.
Yeah. I actually did one for another organization about 2-3 weeks ago.
I see you also sent me something about the refugees. Cool.
Oh yeah, I wanted to, because you were talking about where the Palestinians are today, and I sent you a little picture graph or whatever.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Oh yeah,
Anyone-
sure. My WhatsApp wasn't up. Cool. Yeah, feel free to work on the doc. We'll all work on it and make progress. Yeah. So whose turn is it?
I don't know. Okay, come back to me for final remarks, but I want to say for what Justin said, which is absolutely correct. I don't know Destiny's position on this, but Justin N like always comes in here with like the best takes out of everybody. So
Oh wow, thank you.
really appreciate the takes. And yeah, Gaza was not good. That unilateral pullout was like, I think like one of like the dumbest moves in history, like by like Ariel Sharon. So like I really don't know Dusty's position on this, but I hope he takes into it. I hope he, for I guess the debate, or I guess for future research, I hope him and everybody else kind of takes into account like Gaza was just completely messed up, like Israeli policy all around basically.
Yeah, agreed. Not to mention something that's often overlooked is, when Hamas was elected in 2006, they reached out to Israel to negotiate a truce. They gave some proposal for a 10-year truce, and it's not like that all the terms of that truce were favorable to Israel, but it's not that Israel countered and said, we don't agree to this, but let's talk about it. They outright rejected it, blockaded Gaza, and just considered Hamas an enemy when they actually attempted to negotiate. Is it possible that the negotiations wouldn't have change the situation in any way, shape, or form? Possible, but how can you not even attempt to? Because look where we are now. How many years later? Like 15, 16 years later. You should always try to negotiate before engaging in acts of aggression and violence. Like that's just such a clear mistake. And again, it might not have worked, but at least try. And
I also think there's a history of Hamas approaching Israel. If you even go to the very origins before 1988, when they were the Majmua al-Islamiyya, they actually, Mohammed Zahar, who was I guess the third highest ranking official of he actually visited Tel Aviv and visited, I believe it was Ishaq Rabin, who was defense minister at the time, and approached them because at the time Hamas was the preferred Palestinian resistance movement because they were more involved in charity and things like that. Israel actually promoted them more than the Fatah movement, who, because the first Intifada seemed more dangerous to Israel. And someone wrote in the comment here that since 1995, the bombing, if you look at the first 2 years of the Intifada, Hamas did not kill one Israeli soldier, or I believe one civilian, I should say. And I don't want to say that Hamas is me particularly, I'm not a fan of Hamas as a Palestinian. I'm actually part of the opposition. But their radicalization did come over time, and certain things did come, and that's why the more it seems the more military that's thrown at them, the more radical they become. And I can't imagine what's going to happen now after this. 16,000 Palestinian children in Gaza right now are orphaned, without mother and father, and that's not good because that's 16,000 potential people who are going to be very radicalized.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Justin.
I completely agree. Yeah.
Hello.
Well, yeah, let's make these final thoughts just because I do need to get back to work. So
I didn't know you were hi Adar. I didn't know you were doing I didn't know you were I thought you were starting at 2 o'clock. I didn't realize
You said 11 o'clock on your thing.
No, I messed up. Okay.
Yeah. So I one thing that I've been thinking about is somebody said it in the comments before before you started the stream, and I thought it was interesting ones I've been thinking about too, is that you don't have a lot of women on here, and that's not your fault, but completely, but I think it's interesting to think about, how is, how that happened. In terms, I was just thinking about in terms of Palestinian guests, you could get on here, because I know that's something that you've struggled with, and I was thinking one is I've never heard her, like I've never or even like seen a video of her speak in public. I've just followed her on Twitter. Her name is Anwar Majna, I think. She's a professor at a college in Massachusetts. She's a Palestinian citizen of Israel. She's been involved in like a lot of like peace type stuff. She's a women's studies professor. I think she'd give a lot of interesting insight, both of what's happening with Palestinian citizens of Israel, which I think just in this moment is very interesting. Just how that community's been responding in the face of kind of significant repression of political activities and losing their jobs and stuff like that. I think, and also she could talk about like what's going on in college campuses. Be very interesting.
Can you send me a link to her page?
Yeah, I'll just put her Twitter in there.
Awesome.
And I was also thinking of there's a guy, I think his kids actually went to same college as mine. He's a very prominent activist. Jonathan Kutab. He's Palestinian American. I think he splits his time between the U.S. and
yeah, he's very well known.
yeah, very, very well known. He's he was a founder of he's a Palestinian Christian. He was the founder of one of the co-founders of Al-Haq. And he's also right now the head of Sabil, which is a Palestinian Christian organization. But he wrote something I thought what he's interesting for a few reasons. He's wrote something interesting about like the whole normalization discussion. Where he said that he kind of was like, yeah, I understand where it's coming from. And let me just say, I personally kind of understand where Palestinians are coming from. First, when I heard about, opposition to things like seats of peace and dialogue, I was horrified by it. But now I really get it. And I kind of agree with it. It's, I'm not, sitting around in a circle singing Kumbaya isn't really the most helpful thing to do. But at the same time, he also says, listen, these stringent requirements set out by BDS are really way too strict. But he's also someone who's kind of lived through these whole dialogue issues, and like I think he could talk about where did the idea come from, and like what's good about it, what's bad about it, how has it evolved. I think he'd be very fascinating.
Yeah, I put a link to his book that he wrote. I heard him speak a few months ago. It's called Beyond Two States, and it's a free PDF version, and you can get it in Arabic and Hebrew, I believe, as well.
Cool. Yeah, if you guys can send me links to both these accounts, that'd be great. Happy to reach out.
And what I really liked about his the way there's also a few YouTube videos of him discussing it, is that he doesn't, like, a lot of times, like, I'm not a fan of the one-state solution, but whatever, I'm not Israeli or Palestinian, but the way he presents it is like a lot of times when people talk about one-state solution, they're talking about it basically as a defeat of the Zionism, as a defeat of the Jewish national movement. They're not necessarily saying, we'll make all the Jews leave or anything, but they're sort of saying it as in like, well, this one movement needs to be defeated because it's somehow illegitimate or something like that, which I always think is weird. But Kutab basically says, okay, here you have two national movements. They're here. We're going to acknowledge them, and that's what's going to make up the state, which is very different from what someone say, like what I don't know if you've seen what Silk Road has on their website, or what a movement, or what Jeff Halper put in. So it's very different. And I think that would be a really interesting to hear him talk, and I think he'd probably be able to get on the show.
It's not about defeating Israel as much as it is transforming Israel, and when you use that language and that's the way you approach it, it's something that Israelis are much more likely to agree to and work for. Right? Israelis have worked to transform their government many times. We've seen record levels of protests. So Israelis will rally to transform their government and their society, but they're not going to do it in a way that destroys what they view, keeps them safe, and allows them to remain on the land. So I think that's a healthy framing, and we'll gladly invite them both on. Andrew, final thoughts?
Yeah, I don't really have that many thoughts. First time on stream, first time talking to you. So, again, thank you for letting me on. And, in university, I've studied early Islamic history, and that sort of got me into this topic. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I'll hop on another day and I'll give my thoughts then. But today I'm at work, so yeah, I don't really have the sort of the time right now and
Yeah,
sort
all
of the
good.
brain power. But yeah, thank you for letting me on.
Thanks for joining, Andrew. Ellie, what's up? Final thoughts?
Yeah, so I really like this conversation. We had a very long, extended talk. I wish Justin and Greg joined earlier. I really, but so we can have a lot more of a dialogue. But I really liked our conversation. I really like this channel, Sulha. And if the viewers or you guys like hearing my voice, I'm trying to form a YouTube channel, Social Surrealist, where I talk about Israel-Palestine, from an American Israeli. I try to break down a lot of narratives that is propagated around. And I also eventually want to do external, American or international politics and media analysis. So I really, really appreciate the conversation we had, especially with Adar. And yeah, I'm looking forward to joining the next call-in stream and hopefully disagreeing a lot more.
Awesome. Thank you, Ellie. It's great to have you. And feel free to drop a link to your channel in the comments as well. And yeah, Greg and Justin. Yeah, what's up?
No, I was gonna say I wish we could have got the time right, because there's a few issues that recently I think that deserve a lot of attention. Specifically, the municipal elections that have been held in Israel and Jerusalem. The right wing overwhelmingly ran 7 so far. It looks like they're about to take 17 out of the 30 seats. So it's interesting because in Haifa and Tel Aviv, it looks like the status quo. The more moderate parties won, but places like Jerusalem and the other cities, the right wing really, really killed it, taking over a lot of the municipalities. And this is kind of something that might reflect if a general election was to be called right now. The other thing I wanted to talk about, maybe this could be for another time, is about the New York Times article that was used to promote the Screams Without Proof article. The authors of the so-called journalists, how it's a scandal now with the New York Times, that how they hired these journalists that had no background in journalism. And this kind of sheds light on the Haspara and the propaganda that basically justified this war. And it kind of speaks to the mentality. And I'm going to be hard on Israelis, because Israelis, like your interview with Joseph Cohen, the dude pulled out stuff exactly that this article was saying about the burnt babies, and he even, I think, even said that he saw it, which is funny because he saw something that didn't happen.
He said he would provide videos, which he never did. So
yeah, and the funny thing is that he formulates like, my opinion was set as of October 7th, but I used to follow him actually before October 7th, so he had those positions before. And it's interesting because it's the issue is that Israeli public is still suffering from the psychological effects of October 7th, but at the same time, it's like it's become irrational, because it's like this whole thing about 56 years of occupation and we don't expect nothing in return for it, of course. And this is the biggest stumbling block, because now you have like the United States, the Arab world, and even many other Palestinians that want to move forward that are saying we cannot go back to October 6th. We cannot go back to the status quo, which is what Israel wants, plus more occupation. They want more occupation of Gaza, more control, and the Israeli public is behind it. So I think that the real stumbling block for moving forward is because of this. And I think a lot of it is fueled by the stories that were just everybody ran away with. And I feel bad because on October 7th, I even turned against a lot of what happened because I believed a lot of it, and later found out that they were liars.
Yeah. So there's without a doubt what we could call atrocity propaganda. I don't think it actually is what's fueling the war. I think the Israeli public, even if they didn't believe something's happened that didn't actually happen, it wouldn't change the fact that there would be overwhelming support for destroying Hamas. I think these stories are more so to convince the international community. So it is possible that there would be more international pressure on Israel.
I don't think I agree with you because in my talking with Israelis and stuff, I think that literally they are convinced that these atrocities happened, including the babies, the beheading and stuff. They really believe it.
Yeah, they do believe a bunch of things that didn't actually happen, without a doubt. I mean, every single member of my family does as well. I've spoken to them about it. But you're always going to go to the worst things first to justify the war. If none of those happened, and it was simply just a massacre, which that we know happened. It was a massacre. We know civilians were targeted. We know 150 people were taken hostage, or 250, many of them civilians. That would be enough for there to be overwhelming support for what's happening in Gaza. So I don't think it would actually change is the Israeli perspective to an extent where we'd see a different policy. I think a lot of the atrocity propaganda is there to garner more international pressure.
And we can talk about this more because, like I said, and again, it's that whole nature is that occupation has a price. The more you do military occupation, the more there's this, and it's like the fighting the gasoline with a fire. I don't see how the current situation is going to improve security. It's like more militarism for security, but it just produces more. And unfortunately, what I see is going to happen is we're going to see a bigger October 7th if the things continue as it is.
Yeah. One thing I want to say about, like, yes, I mean, some of the more sensationalistic things.
Greg, I'll let you say this, but keep it at 30 seconds because I really need to run.
Sure. And thanks, Adar. Thanks. I'm not going to say anything more. Take care, bro.
Just some of the more sensationalistic things. Yeah, that's true. They may not have happened, but I think really what Hamas did was kind of bad enough. And so, like, I think it's important that we look at and we get our information right. But at the same time, people are kind of taking the fact that some of these stories may have been exaggerated or just made up, and they're starting to say things like, most of the civilians were killed by the IDF, which is just not true. So, or that, so I just think it's important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean,
even as we oppose the fact that there are now children starving to death in Gaza.
Correct, and I've been saying this ever since the 40 beheaded babies claim came out, that atrocity propaganda fuels atrocity denialism. Every single claim that's made that's not proven, not corroborated, will only be used to dismiss things that actually happened. So if you actually want to be credible, and if you want to weaken atrocity denialism, you should be very accurate with what you're reporting on. And there's no accuracy. There's running with all these wild claims that we now know many of them did not happen, or claims that there's not sufficient evidence to say with high confidence that they did happen. Yet this is part of the normal the normal understanding of what happened on October 7th. And all this does is fuel atrocity denialism, and all it does is just further the trauma that Jews and Israelis are feeling from October 7th. So every time I bring this up on stream, there is backlash. It is a very sensitive topic, but we're not going to shy away from truth. At the end of the day, October 7th was horrific. Every day since October 7th has been horrific, and our goal is to find ways to move forward to a future that not only is not horrific, but that's actually beautiful. That both people can live on the land side by side with one another. I wish I did get you both on earlier. I did mess up with the time. I'm going to be away all of next week, so we could get you guys on again for a call-in show in March. Unless Justin, if you want to do I'm going to be in Costa Rica next week, but if you want to actually organize your own stream, you're welcome to do that. Just reach out to me and we can.
Okay. Have a good trip, and we'll see what if there's a need, if there's an interest, maybe we could work out something.
Okay, awesome. So Justin, Greg, thank you so much, and whoever else joined the stream today. Connor, I do see you here in the waiting room. I know you just visited Kibbutz Be'eri today, which is one of the kibbutzim that was attacked. And I do want to hear your insights, but I really need to run. So either you can hop on a stream that Justin's going to organize, and if not, then we could have you on mid-March. On Sunday, I'm going to have Louis Fishman, who is an expert at pre-Ottoman or late Ottoman era of Israel-Palestine. We're going to talk about Jewish-Palestinian relations, which is a highly contested topic. So I'm very excited to talk to him because I personally don't quite know what the relations were like. So that's going to be this Sunday. It's going to be at 6 p.m. Jerusalem time. And love you all. See you soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care, brother. Bye-bye.